What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, I just want to talk to you guys about whether you should buy a classic Duramax pickup truck in 2026. So behind me is my 2006 Chevy Silverado 2500 HD. It's got the LBZ Duramax 6.6 liter. So I want to talk to you about why I think you should get a classic Duramax. So that's from the years 2001 to 2007. Those are the pre-emissions Duramaxes in Chevy and GMC. It's going to be the GMC Sierras or the Chevy Silverados, and why you should actually get this truck right behind me. Now, it's not for sale, obviously, but a truck like this one is what I recommend. But I'm going to talk to you about my experiences so far purchasing one of these trucks in 2026. I just got this truck 3 or 4 months ago in early February, and I did a lot of modifications to it already. I'll talk about that. Also, you can check out my off-roading and truck playlist to see all of my videos with this truck, all the different mods I've done. I still have a lot more mods to do, but I've had so much fun modifying this truck. If you're a truck enthusiast, or you just love vehicles, you love tinkering with vehicles, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, if you just like to learn new things and learn new skills, if you're that type of person, then this is the type of truck for you. So let me turn the camera around and I'll share some of my experiences so far with this truck. And also I want to talk about some of the things you should look out for if you're going to be buying one of these trucks, because it took me probably 6 or 8 months to find this truck, and I basically found the ideal truck. So let me flip the camera around and we'll talk about it. So like I said, this is my 2006 Silverado 2500 HD, and it's got the Allison 1000 transmission. If you guys are not aware of why that's important, so Allison transmissions are known to be extremely heavy duty. They're commercial grade. Actually, Allison made transmissions for military vehicles, for the old school Humvees, and for a lot of military trucks they had Allison transmissions. Also commercial vehicles, school buses, semi trucks have Allison transmissions. So the classic Duramaxes from 2001 to 2007 had the true Allison transmission. After that, I forget exactly what year it was. I think it might have actually gone into like 2014. They started to actually not use Allison transmissions, even though they had the branding Allison. But basically GM made their own transmission that got Allison's stamp of approval. So actually they were GM transmissions branded under Allison, but they're not true Allison. Obviously those transmissions are just as fine. The new 2500s and 3500s, they have the, I think the 10L90 GM transmission, which has the Allison stamp. But I mean, those transmissions can handle 1,000 pounds of torque, but nothing beats a true Allison transmission. If you're a person who likes nostalgia and vintage things, this is the type of truck for you. This is a vintage truck. This is a nostalgic truck. I mean, you guys remember those old school Silverado commercials with the cat eyes? I mean, just look at that. It's just such a classic look. So just the appearance alone, it's just so cool to be rolling around town with a classic truck like this. One that most people don't drive. So just the looks alone, I absolutely love the cat eye look. It's just a classic look, very vintage, and you're definitely going to get a lot of looks from people just seeing a cat eye rolling down the road. People are naturally going to look, because it's just something you don't see all the time anymore. And the Sierras have a nice look to them as well. They don't have that cateye look. Their headlights are more rounded, kind of more like oval, but they have that classic vintage look to them from the early 2000s. And you know, every time I see a cateye driving down the road, before I got this truck at least, every time I would see a cateye, I would just think of those commercials, the old school Chevy commercials, the Chevy trucks commercials like a rock. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen those commercials, you know, where they're hauling some crazy weight up a mountain, or they're dumping, you know, boulders in the bed and then, you know, driving like 50 miles an hour down a dirt road, you know. Just so nostalgic, so American. So aside from the appearance, I want to go into some other things. So just from a technical standpoint, the number one thing, the first thing I noticed, because I already had a Silverado before I got this one, except mine is a 2021. This is a 2006, like I said. Believe it or not, the old Silverados have a lot in common with the new Silverados, in that the way that things are laid out, even though my new Silverado is a 1500 and this is an older, you know, almost 20 years older 3/4 ton, still the way the engine bay is laid out, the way that they do things under the hood and the suspension and everything, it's very similar. So if you have a newer Silverado or a newer GM vehicle, you're gonna find that working on one of these classic Duramaxes is not gonna be as much of a learning curve. It's not like you're jumping over from you know, a Chevy to a Ford, you know, where things are completely different types of clips and different wiring, different everything, okay? Very similar to the new generation vehicles, okay? So if you're used to working on newer Chevy trucks and you get one of these, you're gonna find a lot of similarities. One of the other things I noticed is that the tuning is super easy on these trucks. The ECMs and the TCMs back in those days, they were not encrypted like today. So nowadays, when you want to tune your truck, you got to get it decrypted, okay? You got to pay a lot of money from a company like HP Tuners to decrypt your engine computer and your transmission computer. Otherwise you can't mess with it. The companies purposely did that so people wouldn't mess around with their tunes, and that was mostly for climate change purposes. They didn't want people messing with the tunes, and you know, also liability reasons. They don't want people, you know, messing up the tune and then getting into an accident, stalling out on the highway, or you know, whatever, racing with their vehicles. So they started locking the computers probably about 10 years ago, maybe a little longer is when they really started locking the computers down. But really, like the last 3 to 4 years, the vehicles now are impossible to tune because the encryption is so hard to break, and you have to pay a lot of money to decrypt the computers. And then even then, the electronics are even more sensitive now than they were 10, 20 years ago. So when you start messing around with your tunes and you start changing things, the vehicles are so sensitive that they'll start throwing codes and doing all kinds of weird things, locking your truck up so you can't drive. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff they have now. So even though this is an electronic vehicle, electronic fuel injected, you know, vehicle with a computer, it's not, you know, like a 5.9 Cummins, it's not a 6.5 Detroit, you know, 350 Chevy small block or something. It's still electronically injected. It has a computer, you know, it is pretty sophisticated, but it's a lot simpler than current trucks. And I can tell you from my experience with my 2021 Trail Boss, I did a lot of tuning to it. I also had it supercharged, and I ran into an issue once I supercharged it. It caused a battery drain. I had to reflash the whole computer. You just get a lot of weird issues with these new vehicles because the amount of sensors that they have on these new vehicles, so many sensors, so many electronics, and they program these new vehicles such that when you start messing around with stuff, they'll throw your truck into limp mode. You won't be able to drive. You'll have all kinds of codes. These old trucks, they were truly meant to be workhorses. And what that means is when you want a workhorse truck, you don't want things that are complicated. You don't want things to break down easy. You want to have simple parts that you can quickly change and you can quickly fix things in the field. And new trucks now, you know, they're not made for that. New trucks, you know, if you have an issue, it's going to be in the shop for a couple days, couple weeks. You know, they made these trucks back when people actually bought trucks for truck stuff, you know. Now people buy trucks to haul groceries, but back in the day, you know, these were true farm trucks, true oil rig trucks, you know, work trucks that would go off-road and tow thousands of pounds. And, you know, you can't have a truck that's gonna break down easy and you know, have very complicated electrical systems that you're gonna throw a code and the truck's not gonna be able to drive, and you're in the northern slope of Alaska and you're towing a bulldozer, or not a bulldozer, you know, some machinery, and you know, you throw a code, you're in limp mode, you're on the Alaska highway. What are you gonna do, you know? So these trucks were made to last. They were made to work. Trucks today are not made to work. They're not made to last. This was the last generation of trucks that were actually built to last, and they didn't have the planned obsolescence in this generation. Okay, these trucks, they actually competed on which trucks could last the longest and which were the most reliable back in those days. You know, 20 years ago, in the 90s up through the early 2000s, you know, Chevy, Ford, and Dodge, they were actually competing over who could have the longest lasting truck, the most you know, toughest truck. Now they don't care about that. They all just make them fail after 50,000 miles so they can, you know, charge you at the dealership. So when you buy one of these classic Duramaxes, you're getting a true workhorse, a true American workhorse, built to last, relatively simple. Again, it's still, you know, electronically fuel injected, but that kind of gives you that happy medium. Okay, and that's what I was going to get into with this. Aside from, you know, the simpleness, you know, less sensors, easier tuning, you know, no encryption. You don't need to decrypt anything. You can buy tuning tools like EFI Live and completely tune your truck without having to pay for HP Tuners credits, which sucks. You know, if you guys are not aware, HP Tuners is a service, a tuning service. They'll unlock your computer for you, but every time you want to tune it or edit your tune, you got to pay like $500 for them to, you got to buy credits. Okay, that's how they make money. Okay, so once they decrypt your computer, they have full control over your own truck's computer. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't like people controlling me, especially not my truck. Okay, this truck, I can tune it thousands of times if I want. Nobody has the keys to it. Nobody has control over my computer. I can tune it as much as I like, by whoever I like, however I like. So that's a huge plus, but it is a happy medium. So you get the best of both worlds, because it's not purely mechanical like a 5.9 Cummins, and it's not so overly electronical like modern trucks where it throws a code if you change a light bulb. You know, like there's literal, this literally happens. People with newer generation trucks like these, they'll change to LED bulbs and they'll have to go to the dealer because their lighting control module will shut the whole truck down, you know, because they put the wrong bulb in. I mean, it's just nuts, but it actually, that stuff happens, you know. So so you get that happy medium, because electronic fuel injection is superior to mechanical injection, unless you're doing stuff like sled pulls, you know, and you're just after, you know, the maximum power, maximum reliability. You know, then mechanical is the best thing, because it's, you know, bomb proof and you can tune it up to the max and, you know, maximum fueling and all that. But if you're using your truck for daily driving, plus a little bit of work, plus maybe you want to, hook up to a sled during the summer months and, you know, go to your local fair and pull the sled a little bit. You know, electronic fuel injection allows you to fine-tune everything, but this truck was from a generation where it wasn't overkill. Okay, the electronics were not overkill like today. All right, so that's a big one. And then going back to the simplicity aspect, so another thing too is that a lot of the minor things in the truck are so much easier to work on. Like, you know, everything is just made much more simple, like the locking mechanisms on the clips. If you're disconnecting harnesses, disconnecting you know, different electronics, you know, sensors, bulbs, things like that. You know, these newer vehicles now, they have these crazy locking mechanisms on those clips to hold the sensors in. These, you know, and sometimes it can take hours to figure out how to properly disconnect just a light bulb or a sensor, and you can end up breaking the clip. And if you do that, you got to rewire a whole new connector or a whole new sensor. You know, something as simple as changing a light bulb can turn into a trip to the dealer, and they do that on purpose. They do that on purpose because they don't want you fixing your own vehicles. They don't want you, you know, saving money. Okay, they want you to go to the dealership to do basic maintenance like oil changes and, you know, changing your wiper blades and stuff like that, changing bulbs. You know, they make money on that, so they want to make it as hard as possible, you know, to intimidate people from doing it themselves. And so with this truck, it's still simple enough where just disconnecting sensors, disconnecting wiring, it's just a lot simpler. The connectors are so much simpler. For example, when I was installing the DSP5 switch on this truck, which is the 5-position tune switch, which I'll get into in a moment, I had to actually tap the main ECM, or, you know, engine computer wiring harness. I had to, you know, connect the switch to the actual harness itself. And, you know, in order to do that, I had to disconnect the main harness from the engine computer. And I was blown away by how simple it was and how quick it was. So easy to access. The computer was right inside the engine. On my 2021, they put the computer in front of the wheel, and you have to take the wheel well liner off, and there's all this crazy like locking mechanisms that you have to, I had to watch like 10 videos when I had to take that computer off to send it off for a bench flash. I had to watch like 10 YouTube videos just to how to disconnect that damn thing. With this truck, it was literally just one lever. You just pull the lever up and the whole thing disconnects from the computer. Super simple, nothing to break, nothing complicated, and that goes for the whole truck. I noticed that's the way it is with the whole truck, with all the wiring. It's a lot easier to work on. Another thing I like about these classic Duramaxes is that they don't have this massive bulky presence like new trucks today. I hate to, you know, put anybody's truck down or anything, but if you look at new trucks from the last 5 years, whether it's Fords, Dodges, Chevys, GMCs, they look too bulky. They look too boxy, too massive. They're becoming super heavy. Some of these trucks just bone stock with, you know, factory tires. They're coming out, you know, 7,800 pounds. And that's without, you know, big tires, without a lift kit. You know, this truck, I just went on the scales today. It weighs 7,300 pounds, but I put these big 35-inch tires and beefy suspension components, but bone stock, it was like 6,700 pounds, which is light for a 3/4 ton. Now, granted, these classic Duramaxes, you're not gonna get the same crazy tow ratings like the new ones. The new ones, you know, you can tow 20,000 pounds comfortably. I think the dualies can go up to 30,000 or more, okay? But for my purposes, I'm not towing 30,000 pounds. I'm not a hotshot trucker. I just need something rugged, reliable, that can do a lot of different things, that can tow pretty heavy, but still be agile enough to go off-roading. And that's what I like about the classic Duramaxes, and just any truck from that era. The heavy-duty trucks from that era were more agile and a little bit lighter. then the new trucks today, they just don't have that same look, and they're so bulky and massive and extremely long. You know, this truck, it's only slightly larger than my half-ton, my 2021 Trail Boss. So that makes it a lot easier to handle, a lot easier to drive, a lot easier to park, turn around, etc. So going back into the tuning aspect, one thing that you can easily do on these trucks is you can delete them. I'm sure a lot of you guys are waiting for me to talk about this. You're probably sitting there, oh, it's pre-def. Yeah, these trucks are pre-emissions, okay? So you're still gonna have some emissions equipment depending on which one you get, because you can get the LB7, which is 2001 to 2004 and a half, LLY 2004 and a half to 2005, and then 2006 to 2007 is my LBZ, okay? But all those trucks were pre-def, so you're not gonna have the def system. You're still gonna have some form of emissions, like the LBZ. This is the latest model, the 2006 of the classic Duramaxes. From the factory, it came with a EGR, PCV, and a catalytic converter. Okay, but just gonna shut the truck off for now. I hate idling for long periods of time. I just wanted you guys to hear the truck. Another thing too, with you know, exhaust idling, it makes the best noise when it idles. It has that classic diesel clatter. You know, if you like that, this is the type of truck for you, because back then they used different types of injectors. So, or at least the spray pattern was different. They didn't use, so like newer diesels, they use a lot more like smaller injection. When they squirt the fuel into the cylinders, rather than like one big squirt or several big squirts, it's like a lot more small squirts. And what that's supposed to do is remove that diesel clatter, because, you know, the big car companies didn't like that people had trucks that were noisy. They wanted people to buy a truck that drives like a Cadillac but tows like a semi. So nowadays the fuel injectors, they'll squirt a lot more smaller squirts in the engine, the fuel, diesel fuel. Back then, when these trucks were made, they just, you know, did the standard, you know, diesel injection, which is, you know, more larger squirts of fuel, which creates that clatter noise, okay? So if you like that diesel clatter, which I do, it reminds me of being a kid, going on the school bus and just sitting in the school bus and hearing that diesel engine rev up, you know, going up hills or coming up from a stop sign. You hear that diesel, that classic diesel engine noise. And then when it's idling and you can feel the vibrations in the school bus and the floorboards, that's kind of what the experience is going to be like when you drive one of these trucks. That's the first thing when I got this truck and I took it for a first test drive. That's what it reminded me of. It's like a old school bus from the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you know, vibrations, diesel clatter, a faint smell of diesel smoke. You know, if that's not for you, then this is not the type of truck you want to get. If you want something more like a Cadillac, then you want a modern truck, okay? You will have a little bit of vibration. You're going to have more engine noise when you're accelerating. You know, you're going to hear that diesel engine revving up. You're going to hear the clatter through the firewall, because the way that the fuel injection system is, and then also the sound insulation was different back then. They didn't prioritize that. You know, this is from 20 years ago when the big three automakers were competing for the most toughest truck, the best workhorse, the most reliable truck. They didn't care about, you know, how quiet the engine was. They wanted a truck that could last for ranchers, for oil rig workers, for whatever, you know. So, you know, you're going to hear the clatter, which I like. That's, to me, that's an advantage. It gives you that sound. And, you know, I hate to say it, but that's going away. As the years go on, trucks like this, you're not going to be able to find them anymore. And that's why I would recommend to get one now, because as time goes on, finding a truck in this good condition is going to be harder and harder, because the trucks are going to be getting progressively older. And people that have these trucks, they're not taking care of them. Most of them are just, you know, old beaters that someone just parks in a field and lets them rot, and then they put them up for sale because they're moving and they want you to pay, you know, an astronomical amount for a rusted out truck. That's usually the case. You know, sometimes they're in good shape. This is one of the rare ones that are in good shape. So I'm going to get into, you know, what to look for in a second here. But, you know, that's why one big reason I recommend to get one now is, as time goes on, as the years go on, it's going to be harder and harder to find one of these. And again, you know, that classic diesel clatter, the smell of the exhaust, you know, because of all the emissions equipment now, you're not going to be able to get that anymore. The trucks, they may even outlaw diesel trucks. Who knows? You know, they may only make diesel trucks for commercial vehicles, you know, and you won't even be able to buy diesel pickups in 5 or 10 years. It's just going to be, you know, EV trucks like the Cybertruck or something gay like that. So get one of these now while you can, all right? Another thing too is, you know, because it's a diesel, even though these trucks are old, the engines and usually the transmissions will last longer than the frame and the body. Okay, diesel engines by their nature last longer than gas engines. They run cooler. It's a completely different design. Diesel versus gas. Gas runs hotter, the engines run hotter. They use aluminum blocks versus diesels use iron blocks. And, you know, so diesels are just by their nature can last, you know, 1,000,000 miles. I mean, you can look up online. There was a video that Truckmaster did. If you haven't heard of Truckmaster, check him out on YouTube. Truckmaster did a video about a guy who has a 1,000,000-mile Duramax, and he basically kept it 90% stock. He didn't even put an intake on it. 90% stock, maybe 95% stock. 1,000,000 miles and 200,000 or something. Original engine, original transmission. Okay, so it can be done. These trucks can last if you don't beat on them. If you maintain, you know, this guy was very good with his maintenance, to say the least. He kept up with his maintenance. Also, maintenance, a lot of people don't realize, is cleaning. Okay, cleaning the undercarriage, cleaning the frame, because on an older truck like this, it's more so the frame and the undercarriage and the body that you got to worry about rather than the engine. Unless, because the engine, you can always change, you know, a cracked piston. You can rebuild an engine. Okay, bad head gasket, you could pull the engine out, fix it up, put it back in. Same thing with a transmission. But if you have a rotted out frame, rotted out body, you know, that's a nightmare, you know. So and that's going to lead me to one of the things you got to look for when you're buying one of these trucks. The biggest thing is rust. Okay, you got to find a truck that doesn't have any rust or very minimal rust, especially the frame. Okay, I got lucky. This was a stereotypical grandpa truck from Southern Virginia. By the way, I got this truck from Davis Auto Sales in Richmond, Virginia. Highly recommend them. If you're looking for a high quality classic truck, whether it's a classic Duramax or a square body, you got to check out Davis Auto Sales. I'm going to leave their phone number and their website in the description down below. Davis Auto Sales in Virginia. Okay, that's where I got this truck from. It was a stereotypical grandpa truck, has 269,000 miles. I had an oil change analysis done by the Motor Oil Geek. Everything came back clean. The oil analysis on this truck with this many miles came back better than my 2021 Trail Boss. Okay, lower wear metals, lower everything. Okay, how is that? Why? Because they built these trucks to last 1,000,000 miles or even more. Even at 1,000,000 miles, the block's still good. You just change the head gasket, you change the pistons out, the rings, whatever, the rods, and you're good to go. Okay, but rust is going to be your number one thing. So that's what you got to look for when you're buying one of these trucks. And like I said, it took me about 6 to 8 months to find this thing. There's a lot of sketchy people out there selling junkers. So don't get lured into a trap. Don't get pressured. Wait, be patient until the right one comes around. Okay, there were a couple times where I almost pulled the trigger on a couple of now I'm looking back and I'm so happy I didn't do that, okay? You'll find a good truck, just take the time, and you may have to do some repairs. You know, you may get a truck, for example, that has zero rust, okay, very clean, but maybe it needs a head gasket job, or maybe it needs fuel injectors. That's okay, okay? But the worst thing is a rusted out frame, rusted out body. I had to rust proof the entire undercarriage. I did that myself with, I don't know, a couple dozen cans of Cosmoline, you know, and took a lot of days to do it because you got to apply multiple coats. You got to clean the frame, but you may have to do stuff. You may have to, you know, get dirty and spend a lot of time getting it to where it is. Like, you know, this truck to get it to this level, I did a lot of stuff. And then the Davis Auto Sales, they did some work to it too. I think they changed the water pump, they changed the brake booster, you know. So high mileage old vehicles, there's going to be some stuff that needs to be done, but your main enemy is going to be rust. Everything else you can deal with, okay? You can deal with bad head gasket, you can deal with transmission slipping, you can deal with, you know, water pump. Those can be replaced. But if your vehicle's rusted out, you have, you know, all kinds of problems with rust, there's not much you can really do, okay? Unless you want to do a complete cab change or buy new frames. Yeah, it's just not realistic, okay? So rust is going to be your number one thing to look for. Also, you're going to want to check your injector balance rates. So if you don't know what an injector balance rate is, basically your truck, when injectors are dirty, you know, they get naturally dirty over time because they're in the cylinder, so the carbon builds up. If one injector is not squirting as much as it's supposed to, then the other injectors will compensate, and that's what will show up. Your computer will monitor that, and that's what balance rates are. So if you see, you know, one injector that has an unusually high balance rate, it means that the injector's not working, and typically you want them to be within plus or minus 4, okay? And I did my balance rates, and they were all within plus or minus 2, okay? I think 1 or 2 of them is at like 2.5, 2.7, and you have to do the balance rates the right way. You have to drive the truck 15 to 30 minutes, get it up to operating temperature, and then you're going to put it in park and let it idle, let the idle settle down, and then you're going to want to check your balance rates at idle and park, okay? And you want them to be within plus or minus 4. And look, even if you have an injector that's bad and you got to do an injector swap, so another thing about these trucks is that you can get them for anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000, and you know, you're going to be able to tow 10 to 15,000 pounds comfortably without any major modifications. Now, you know, obviously the new trucks, you can tow 20,000 pounds, 30,000 pounds, but you're going to be paying, you know, 80 grand or 100 grand. The cheaper ones, maybe 65 grand for a new one. So for 10 to 30 grand, you know, you're getting a truck with a lot of capabilities, okay? So the price is a huge benefit if you want to get into the diesel world, if you want to get a heavy duty truck for work or for pleasure, or just to have a general purpose truck. Highly recommend a classic Duramax. And again, much easier to work on. I've done so much to this truck. It's too much to list in this video, but you know, even just simple things like, for example, the tailgate on this truck is solid metal. So, and look, the original JD Power sticker, check that out. Most dependable heavy-duty full-size pickup in the US. Where do you see that anymore? You don't see that with trucks anymore. They're not fighting for the JD Power Most Dependable Heavy-Duty Truck Award anymore. Okay, they're fighting for the best emissions and fuel economy, okay? They don't care about that stuff anymore, okay? But, I mean, even though the new trucks, you can tow 20 to 30,000 pounds with them, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're more reliable and more rugged. Yeah, they have higher payloads. Like this truck from the factory, it's officially rated with a 2,300 pound payload capacity. You know, new trucks, 3,000, 3,500 pound payload. But are they as reliable? Are they as rugged? You know, and I don't think they are. I mean, look at this tailgate. This tailgate is solid metal, okay? It's heavy. It's solid. You know, it probably weighs 100 pounds. This tailgate alone is 100 pounds. The new trucks, the tailgates are aluminum. You know, like a 5-year-old could lift them up. In my opinion, you know, you want to have a nice solid tailgate. Listen to the sound when I close it. Okay, solid metal tailgate, no electronic BS here. Just a simple handle, you know. I've seen a lot of people with the new trucks that have the button here. The button goes out and then they can't open their own tailgate. It's just ridiculous. You know, everything's solid metal. The whole body is metal. There's no aluminum. Everything is metal. Okay, so heavy duty. And one of the things you're going to want to get is edge monitor. I have the Edge CTS3. That's that little screen there. Okay, so you can monitor all your engine parameters. Okay, and I recommend putting a small lift or leveling kit and some good tires. I have Wrangler Duratrax 295/70 R18s with some Method 709 heavy duty wheels. And, you know, there's so much aftermarket support for these trucks. That's another thing, too. If you like to tinker on vehicles, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, this is the vehicle for you, okay? Because the aftermarket world is huge for these trucks. So even though it's hard to find OE parts for these trucks because they're, you know, pushing on 20 to 25 years, and officially the dealership here locally told me that they don't work on trucks that are older than 25 years. So 25 years is the cutoff. Okay, so right around now, the earlier generations, the LB7, you're going to have issues going to a dealership to get parts. But the good thing is the aftermarket is huge for these trucks. So that's not really a worry. And then that's also a benefit, because if you like to customize things, there's just endless options, you know. So you can customize the crap out of your truck. You can do anything you want pretty much. And because these trucks are easy to work on, they don't throw codes like the new trucks do. You know, new trucks, you can't really modify them. You can't mess with them because they'll throw a code for everything. Okay, you put a new bumper on, you know, it's a code. It's a traction control, weight imbalance sensing, or, you know, it's just, you can't do anything on new trucks. You can, but it's a lot more limited. Okay, it's mostly cosmetic stuff, like if you want to put new mud flaps on, or you want to put a metal bumper on. That's pretty much it. You're not going to be able to tune and get a lot of power out of new trucks. These trucks, by the way, with the tune that I have from Piston Twistin', I highly recommend them. Piston Twistin', the owner is Matt. Really nice guy. He's helped me out a lot with this truck, and he's helping me with my Trail Boss now. Piston Twistin' is the place you want to go to for your tunes. If you do get a classic Duramax, even with my fully deleted truck, it's actually hard for me to blow black smoke. Even though there's soot inside of my exhaust, it doesn't blow a lot of black smoke. He has very clean tunes. You get a lot of power. His DSP5 tune is just absolutely amazing with the 5-piece switch. I run tune 4 for my daily driving, which is like plus 100 horsepower. It drives amazing. You know, and then you have your tow tunes as well. But highly recommend the Piston Twistin' DSP5. You're going to want to get that. Well, that's going to be one of the first mods you want to do to these trucks. You know, get your Piston Twistin' DSP5. You're going to want to fully delete your truck if you can. Again, there's some legal risks to doing that. You know, but, you know, EGR would be the first place to start if you have an LLY or LBZ. LB7 didn't come with EGR, so that's one less thing to worry about. Okay, but, oh, another thing you're going to want to check for, aside from rust, is you're going to want to, and balance rates, you're going to want to check for blow-by. That's very easy to do. You just open your oil filler, and you can put your hand over it and feel if you feel any like pressure coming up from the oil fill neck. What a lot of guys do is they'll take the oil cap and turn it upside down and sit it on top of the oil fill neck. And if it like starts to pop up, that means you have a head gasket issue. and you're getting blow-by. And then for head gaskets, I'm sorry, you're getting blow-by through the pistons. And then for head gaskets, you're going to want to check your radiator hose, your upper radiator hose. You're going to want to make sure the truck wasn't recently driven, like, you know, the guy didn't drive and warm up the truck for you before you showed up. And you're going to want to squeeze the radiator hose and feel if it's stiff, okay? You don't want to have a stiff radiator hose, especially your upper radiator hose. It should be soft. When you squeeze it, you should be able to squeeze it, and the pipe should, the hose should flex. Okay, that's that big radiator hose at the top of the engine. The first one you see, that real thick hose, you're going to squeeze that. If it moves when you squeeze it, you're good. If it feels tight, like it's filled with pressure, that's bad. That means you have a head gasket issue. You can also look inside your coolant bottle and see if the coolant is clean. If it has like a grayish color, that means that, you know, you're getting some engine blow-by gases and stuff getting into the coolant, mixing. So that means you have a bad head gasket. Okay, so those are the big things to look for: the blow-by, the head gasket, the injector balance rates. But again, these are things you can fix. Okay, the fuel injectors, you can actually swap them out through the wheel wells here. Okay, you can pull the liners out. You can actually do the injectors yourself. It's hard, but there's plenty of shops that'll do it. You probably will have to do injectors at some point, unless you don't keep the truck for very long. But, you know, lots of shops specialize in these trucks. They're very popular, so you're not going to have an issue finding a shop that can do that for you, unless you live in California or New Yorkistan or somewhere like that, where basically diesels are prohibited. And, you know, you may need to do some light to moderate repairs, maybe even some major repairs. But the nice thing is with these trucks is you're starting from a solid foundation. So imagine you're looking for a house and you find like a 1970s, 1980s house. It's got some years on it, but the foundation is solid. You know, it has a solid foundation. It has nice construction. You know, back in the day, they built houses a lot better than nowadays. They build houses cheaper, you know, because they want to get the house sold as quickly as possible. Just like with cars and trucks, it's the same thing, you know. So you're starting with a solid foundation. And so even if you have to invest some money to repair, it's worth it, because once you do those repairs, you're going to have a real solid truck. People are going to look at it when you drive down the road because it's unique, it's different, it's vintage. Okay, if you're a single guy, the chicks may look at you. All right, so you're starting from a solid foundation, but you will have to do some, you know, even if you get a super clean truck, like this truck is the best case scenario. Okay, this is a grandpa truck. It was mostly driven like a daily driver. They didn't even haul much with it. Like the bed, I'll try to show you guys the bed. I mean, even the bed liner is super clean. It's like not scratched at all. Okay, you can see the bed liner. There's my fishing pole. Look at the bed liner. You know, there's no scratches on it. You know, from what I understand, this was a grandpa truck, but you're gonna have little things. You know, you got some surface rust here, not a big deal. Okay, you clean that off, put some Cosmoline on it. Cosmoline is gonna be your best friend. Okay, you may have little chips in the paint. Okay, not a big deal. You're gonna have to get some GM Olympic white or Summit white touch-up paint. Okay, that's what you're gonna want to have. That's what I have. I have a stockpile of touch-up paint and Cosmoline. Those are gonna be the biggest things you do. And also liquid electrical tape. Liquid electrical tape, that brings me back to another thing to look for, is the wiring. Okay, these are old trucks. Depending on how the truck was maintained, how it was stored, you may have rotted wires. You know, the insulation starts to dry, gets cracked, you know, then you have short to ground issues. So inspect the wiring. If you have a truck that has just rotted wiring, I mean, you're going to want to get underneath, check all the wires underneath, check the main harness. The main harness runs along the driver's side frame rail. Check all the wiring that goes to the transfer case, the transmission. Okay, check your fuel lines, your brake lines, make sure they're not rotted out. Okay, you have your fuel tank is on this side. Okay, your fuel tank is going to be right over here on the driver's side, right near where your fill is right here. Okay, fuel tank's going to be right under there. Just get underneath there, look at the fuel lines, see if they're rotted out, because that's something that you can deduct from the price. If the fuel lines have to be swapped out, it's not a big deal, but it's going to cost money because you got to swap all the lines out. And just, you know, look at your wiring. You know, if you have rotted wiring, that's a big problem too, so that can be deducted from your cost. Okay, but liquid electrical tape, you know, I went through, when I first got this truck, the first thing I did, rust proof the whole frame, okay, with Cosmoline, dozens of cans, probably $500 worth of Cosmoline, and many days on my back getting dirty. You know, it just has to be done. You know, there's no, you can go to a shop and have them undercoat it for you as well. You don't have to do it that way. But same thing, another thing that I did is I went through all my wires. Okay, I pulled the fender liners out. These are easy. Another thing too about these are easy to pull out. The new trucks, it's such a pain to get these liners out. You know, it's so complicated. These are made to be taken off to access the engine, okay? Because the Duramax engine bay is really cramped. It's not like a Cummins or a big rig, you know, where you have a big 6-cylinder. It's a V8 engine, so it's pretty cramped in there. They got to stuff the turbo and all the piping for it. So these are easy to pull off. You just have clips and stuff. But pull those off, open your hood, look at all the wires, and go through. A lot of the loom is going to potentially be worn out and cracking and brittle. You're going to want to replace that loom with new loom. If you see any exposed wires, a lot of times what will happen is the loom will start to get hot from heat cycles, like especially around your radiator pipes and any kind of areas that get hot and cold, like your exhaust manifold. You know, those looms, the wire looms get, you know, brittle because of the heat and the cold, and the heat and the cold. Over time, after 20 years, that loom, you'll touch it and it'll just break apart like dust, you know. So you're going to want to reloom that, and you'll have little exposed sensor wires that, you know, if those wires get messed up, they short out, you're going to have weird issues. So liquid electrical tape, go through all your wiring, put liquid electrical tape on any exposed wires, reloom everything, rust proof everything. Go through with your touch-up pen, your GM touch-up pen, or your Duplicolor touch-up pen. See, like right here, you can see I just touched that up. You know, so you're going to have a little bit of work to do, but it's worth it in my opinion, okay? You may have to change out burnt out bulbs. Like the DRL bulbs are notorious for burning out. They run real hot, so you may need new DRL bulbs. You know, I swapped these out for LED, and your marker bulbs may burn out, okay? Just stuff like that, all right? And one last thing is, if you're going to be choosing a truck, you have your LB7, your LLY, and your LBZ. There's pros and cons to each of them, but this truck right here is considered the best. It's the holy grail of Duramaxes, and the reason why is that it's considered to be the most robust. The internals are the strongest, so the crankshaft, the rods, everything is supposed to be the strongest, but the LB7 and the LLY have some advantages over the LBZ. If you want something that's super simple, you're going to go with LB7, because that one has no emissions equipment whatsoever, straight from the factory. It doesn't have a variable geometry turbo like the LLY and the LBZ. The LLY has the 5-speed Allison. This truck, the LBZ, has a 6-speed Allison. So if you're doing a lot of highway driving, you know, over 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, you know, the 6-speed Allison is a huge benefit. Okay, but LB7 is going to be your simplest. That's going to be the one that may require the most tinkering. LLY, LBZ are kind of the more modern versions of the classic Duramaxes, but they're all, you know, much less modern than today's trucks. So that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Wanted to just share this with you. I've had an awesome experience with my LBZ Duramax. Highly recommend them. And like I said, you may have to do some work. It may be light stuff, like with my truck, you know, just rust proofing, cleaning up wiring, touching up some scratches, changing bulbs. That's going to be your best case scenario. And then to the extreme end, you may get some truck that has unknown issues that pop up after you get it. But you know, if it's mostly limited to your powertrain, it's not a big deal, okay? If you have like weird electrical issues, or if you have rusted out frame and body, that's to me is worse, because it's hard to track those problems down unless you have a really good like electrical diagnostics shop near you. Luckily near me, we have Pine Hollow Diagnostics. Check them out. They have a YouTube channel. They helped diagnose my trail boss when I was having a battery drain. Ivan at Pine Hollow Diagnostics. Check him out. I think he does remote diagnostics as well over the computer. But you're going to have a ton of fun if you get a classic Duramax, if you're a truck person, if you like restoring things, if you're a DIY person. If you're looking for a good value and you're a financially savvy person and you want to get a diesel truck, but you don't want to pay as you know $100,000 the price of a house, this is a truck for you. Okay, you will have to put some elbow grease in, you will get dirty, but you know it's worth it, and you're gonna be a lot happier in the long run with something like this that you've put your effort into restoring and you know, making it your own, rather than just buying something that everybody else drives, you know. So that's my recommendation to you. Get you a classic Duramax. Time may be running out to find them. Like I said, be patient. A good one will come along. Look for the rust. That's the biggest thing. Check the wiring as well, and just, you know, the history of the vehicle. You know, how was it maintained? Who owned it? How many owners? You know, you don't want to have a truck that had like 3 owners. You know, ideally 1 or 2 owners is the best. Okay, this truck was 1 owner. It was a 1-owner truck, stereotypical grandpa truck. They just used it for driving around town. They didn't do any crazy stuff with it. Another thing to stay away from is highly modified trucks. You don't want to buy somebody else's project unless you know that the person who did the work knew what they were doing and they had a plan, and they didn't just slap parts on it, you know, like somebody that took the care to carefully select good quality parts, go to good shops to do the work, or if they did it themselves, they did it right. They didn't just half-ass it. Okay, so these are things you're not going to know by reading an ad. You have to talk to the people. You have to ask them who owned it. You know, why are you selling it? What did you do with it? You know, you got to talk and you got to get information about it, because you don't want to buy somebody else's problems. Okay, because that's what a lot of people do with these trucks. They know these trucks are popular. They know everybody wants an LBZ. They know everybody wants a pre-emissions truck. So what they're going to do is, you know, sell you a pile of crap for a lot of money, you know. So you don't want to do that, okay? You don't want to get screwed over. So interview thoroughly, look at pictures, you know, get under, you should have like a checklist when you go to look at these trucks, you know, either in your head or on a piece of paper, a checklist. Is there rust? Is the wiring rotted out? Is the frame rotted out? Is the body rotted out? Was it a multi-owner vehicle with a sketchy history? You know, was it modified in a half-assed way? Okay. So, you know, do your diligence, and I guarantee you it will pay off, and you're going to enjoy your truck. And that's pretty much it. So stay tuned for a lot more videos with this truck. I may do a separate video just overviewing all the mods I've done so far. But, you know, number one thing I would recommend is just if you can't do the EGR delete yourself, find someone that'll do the EGR delete. If you get an LBZ or LLY, LB7, you don't need to worry about that. That's going to really help the longevity of your engine, because you're not recirculating that hot gas with the soot back into your engine from the exhaust. Also, PCV reroute. That's something you can do on your own. Super easy to do. PCV reroute so the oils don't go back into your intake as well. DSP5 switch, get a bigger exhaust. I recommend a 5-inch exhaust, even if you don't have a big tip on the back. You don't need to, but 5-inch exhaust, in my opinion, is mandatory for a diesel to get the exhaust out. You know, with diesels, you don't want back pressure. It's not like a gasser. Okay, you want as much flow as possible to keep the engine cool, to keep the turbo cool. So exhaust, EGR delete, you know, an intake, DSP5 switch. With those things right there, you're going to be in really good shape. Okay, even if you don't do the EGR, but if you do a straight pipe 5-inch exhaust with intake and piston twisting DSP5 switch, man, it's going to be like driving a pulling truck, you know, a sled pulling truck. It's just amazing, the tunability. So until the next time, take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 P's: prepare, practice, and persevere. And here's that edge monitor. You can see I have all the PIDs here monitoring everything. You're definitely going to want to get one of those. Also, one thing I really like is just having a manual parking brake. I mean, I hate electronic parking brakes. They're notorious for failing. Also, when you service your brakes and you have an electronic parking brake, you need a scan tool just to do your brakes, to put your electronic brakes into service mode. So you have to buy a scan tool, and depending on the manufacturer, you may even need to buy a subscription, or it has to be that manufacturer's tool. Also, another thing I highly recommend, the Diode Dynamics D switch. If you're going to be installing any lighting accessories, really any accessories, I highly recommend it. This is the best switch panel on the market. I did put a video up of me installing it, but I'm gonna do another video with some more details because I've done a lot with it since that install video. There's so many things you can do with this. Also, this truck has a manual 4-wheel drive shifter. Unfortunately, I don't know if you guys can see it, my battery's low here, but I have a manual stick to shift into 4-wheel drive. That's another thing that I really like. You know, simplicity, reliability. I mean, just everything on this truck is just absolutely amazing, you know. Just let you guys hear some of that engine clatter. Listen to that. It's just an amazing sound. I just love it. Listen to that. I'll let you listen to the exhaust in case you haven't seen my exhaust videos. Listen to that rumble. Shakes the ground. Sounds awesome. New truck's not going to make that noise. There's no way you can make it sound like that unless you delete the whole DEF system, which will throw tons of codes, thousands of dollars, and it's illegal. So listen to that. American diesel power.